Welcome to the Geostrategic Podcast, your ongoing source for clear, structured updates on global geostrategic challenges. We explore the forces shaping global power, crisis hotspots, and how governments react so you stay informed with less effort. Think of this as your shortcut to being well-informed, directly from our stack of sources. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Specifically, we're looking at the really complex and, rapidly evolving diplomatic efforts to find some kind of resolution. We'll be examining Ukraine's very firm stance against ceding any territory for peace, especially as emphasized by President Zelenskyy. And we'll unpack the highly anticipated, and let's face it, somewhat controversial, upcoming summit. That's the one between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin up in Alaska. There were reports flying around about a possible territorial swap on the table, a move Kyiv strongly rejects. Plus, we'll look at the vital role allied leaders like French President Macron and British Prime Minister Starmer are playing, in supporting Ukraine's position and keeping that pressure on Russia. So the big question we're exploring today is, can a genuine, lasting peace truly emerge when the fundamental demands from opposing sides seem so, deeply incompatible? Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with what truly underpins Ukraine's position, its steadfast refusal to concede any territory for peace. What exactly is President Zelensky's stance here, and why is it so unwavering?
Well, what's absolutely fundamental here, I think, is that Ukraine's position isn't merely a negotiating point. It's not just tactics. It's really a core tenet of their national identity and sovereignty. President Zelenskyy has stated unequivocally, time and again, that Ukraine will never cede land to Russia. And he emphasizes that this stance isn't just policy. It's actually enshrined right there in Ukraine's constitution.
In the constitution itself.
Exactly. He's called any decisions made without Ukraine's direct involvement stillborn decisions. Essentially, his point is that they are against peace and will never work. He insists only a real living peace can actually endure. And the Ukrainian Foreign Minister, Andriy Sybiha, he's echoed this, adding that Russia simply must not be rewarded for starting the war. So the key takeaway really is that for Kyiv, territorial integrity isn't negotiable. It's existential.
Okay, so if Ukraine holds such a firm red line on its territory, that's crystal clear. How does Russia's proposed settlement even begin to fit? The one that reportedly includes these significant territorial concessions from Ukraine. It just seems like a profound disconnect.
That's precisely the issue, isn't it? If we look at the broader context, the Kremlin's reported demands are just in direct opposition to Ukraine's position. It's night and day. We had unnamed sources briefed to Approver. Bloomberg, this was on August 8th, saying Russian President Vladimir Putin is demanding Ukraine cede the entirety of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. And remember, these are large administrative regions, like states or provinces, plus Crimea, of course, all as part of ceasefire negotiations.
Just as part of the ceasefire, not even a final peace deal.
That's the report, yes. This will require Ukraine to withdraw its troops from territory it currently controls in Luhansk and Donetsk. These are areas Russian forces haven't been able to capture fully since, 2014 and substantially since 2022. The terms also reportedly stipulate Russian forces would halt offensives in Kherson and Zaporizhia oblasts, freezing those front lines.
Okay.
But notably, there's no mention of Russian withdrawal from really key strategic points, like the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, or their positions in Kharkiv, Sumy, Dnipropetrovsk, and Mykolaiv oblasts. And critically, it's completely unclear if Russia would give up any land it currently occupies. So the expectation seems to be Ukraine makes huge concessions up front, maybe without any real reciprocal move from Russia.
Wow. Okay, so let's drill down on that. What are the real-world strategic implications if Ukraine were somehow pressured into abandoning the Ukrainian-held parts of Donetsk Oblast? What does that truly mean on the ground for their long-term defense?
Well, it raises a absolutely vital question about Ukraine's long-term security. Ceding the rest of Donetsk Oblast just as a prerequisite for a ceasefire, especially, as you said, with no firm commitment to a final peace settlement that would place Russian forces directly on the new borders of Donetsk Oblast. And that position is significantly less defensible for Ukraine. Hugely so.
Less defensible how?
They would have to abandon what's known as their fortress belt. This is their primary fortified defensive line. They've spent, 11 years reinforcing it since 2014? It comprises 4 major cities, several towns, all along a key highway, crucial logistics hubs. Losing this isn't just giving up land, it's dismantling Ukraine's main defensive backbone.
So, effectively, Russia would gain a massive strategic advantage without even firing another shot in that specific area, wouldn't they?
Exactly right. Forcing Ukraine to concede this means Russian forces would advance, over 80 kilometers further west into Ukraine, without a fight.
80 kilometers.
Over 80 kilometers, yes. This gives them a far more advantageous launching point for any future offensives.
Yeah.
Think about nearby areas like Kharkiv or Dnipropetrovsk oblasts. They'd be roughly 20 kilometers from Izium, for example, and could pose a renewed threat to Kharkiv city itself if fighting flares up again.
Which seems likely if there's no final peace deal.
Precisely. And Ukraine would then face this monumental task, just enormous, of building entirely new defensive fortifications, requiring urgent, massive investment from allies. And they'd have to do it in areas often poorly suited for defense, like open fields, lacking natural barriers. It's a profound, really fundamental shift in the strategic landscape.
Okay, this stark reality brings us straight to the upcoming meeting that's generated so much international buzz, so much attention. President Trump is set to meet President Putin in Alaska August 15th to discuss options for long-term peace. And Trump himself has hinted at some swapping of territories to the betterment of both. What exactly are the reports saying about this potential deal, and how does it align, or maybe more accurately, crash with what we just discussed about Ukraine's firm stance?
Well, according to the Wall Street Journal, citing European and Ukrainian officials who were briefed by the Trump administration,
Yeah.
the indication is that a Russian proposal includes two distinct phases.
Two phases, okay.
The first phase involves Ukraine withdrawing from the rest of Donetsk Oblast. Then Russia and Ukraine freeze the front line. The second phase, as reported, would see Putin and Trump agree on some kind of peace plan, which they would then supposedly take to President Zelenskyy to negotiate. Now, Trump did state on August 8th that there will be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both, but yeah, he offered no further specifics beyond that. But this framework, as you noted, immediately places a really heavy initial burden squarely on Ukraine, demanding significant concessions right up front, before any broader peace is even discussed.
Right, but this proposed sequencing, it seems to contradict not only Ukraine's very clear position, but maybe more surprisingly, President Trump's own initial timeline. Didn't he previously emphasize establishing a ceasefire first? What's going on with this apparent shift in the order of events?
That's what's quite striking here, yes, this reversal in sequencing. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated just on August 6th that a ceasefire is a really important crucial part of the negotiation process because, well, it's exceedingly difficult to negotiate a permanent peace deal under active fire.
Makes sense.
And this echoed Trump's earlier preference, the one we heard about, for establishing a ceasefire before formal peace negotiations even start. But Putin's reported proposal flicks this completely. It demands the surrender of Ukrainian-held territory before any ceasefire is established.
Before, wow.
Yeah. And this has raised, understandably, significant concern among European and Ukrainian officials. They worry Putin is using this offer as a tactical maneuver, maybe, as some speculate, to avoid new U.S. sanctions Trump threatened to impose by August 8th, while, simultaneously just continuing his military objectives on the ground.
So a ploy, essentially.
That's the concern. The Ukrainian side has stated they aren't opposed to proposals in principle, but they've been clear. A ceasefire would be a non-negotiable prerequisite to any further steps. So this tactical reversal really puts a question mark over the sincerity of the offer as a genuine peace initiative.
Okay, so given all that, the potential sidelining, the questionable sequencing, how are Western allies reacting, especially with this very real concern that Ukraine might just be pushed aside in these high-level Trump-Putin discussions? And thinking bigger picture, could sidelining Ukraine actually backfire on the international community's own goals for a stable, lasting peace?
If we connect this to the broader geopolitical picture, Allied leaders are definitely expressing significant concern about precisely that risk. Sidelining Kyiv. French President Emmanuel Macron, for instance, has stressed that, and I'm quoting loosely here, the future of Ukraine cannot be decided without the Ukrainians, who have been fighting for their freedom and security for more than 3 years now.
Right.
And he added that Europeans must also be part of any solution because their own security is inherently at stake, too.
Good point.
And British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has also reiterated unwavering support for Ukraine. He agreed with Zelenskyy on the ongoing need to maintain pressure on Putin. We also saw national security advisors from Kyiv's key allies, the U.S., EU nations, the U.K., they were gathering in Britain on August 9th, specifically to align their views ahead of this Trump-Putin summit.
A united front.
That seems to be the aim, to draw a unified red line with Ukraine, insisting that EU officials should be involved in any potential peace negotiation, and reiterating, really hammering the point, that Ukraine's future absolutely cannot be discussed without Kyiv's direct participation. The New York Times reported that European leaders are increasingly concerned Trump and Putin will just formulate an agreement, that will then be essentially imposed upon Ukraine. Yeah. One European negotiator stated bluntly, "You can't start a process by ceding territory in the middle of fighting. Just can't happen." Another European official put it even more starkly, saying Putin's proposal gives Putin everything he wants in exchange for nothing. So this collective concern from allies, it really underscores their belief that Ukraine's direct involvement is vital, absolutely essential for any agreement to be seen as legitimate or, frankly, to have any hope of actually lasting.
This brings us to a really crucial point about the nature of these negotiations themselves. Given everything we've discussed, how does Vladimir Putin's historical approach to negotiations inform our understanding of these current efforts? I mean, what does his past behavior tell us about the prospects for a genuine, lasting peace here?
It really raises a critical question, maybe the critical question, about sincerity, about good faith in any of these new efforts. Putin has repeatedly, over many years, shown a consistent pattern of using negotiations not really to reach genuine, lasting agreements based on compromise, but rather as a tactical tool, to delay, perhaps, to extract concessions, or just to manage international perceptions while pursuing other goals.
Right, a means to an end, not the end itself.
Exactly. His stated conditions for peace, they often include ceding control of contested regions and imposing severe limits on Ukraine's military and political orientation, its sovereignty, essentially. And these are consistently seen by Ukraine and its allies as just non-starters, complete non-starters. Historically, he hasn't just demanded the Donbass, the eastern Ukrainian region covering Donetsk and Luhansk. He's also talked about this amorphous kind of invented region he calls Novorossiya.
Russia, right.
Yes, implying basically all of southern and eastern Ukraine, regions like Dnipropetrovsk, Mykolaiv, Odessa. Now, this historical pattern strongly suggests a strategic approach to talks, one focused on achieving his war aims rather than perhaps a genuine desire for give-and-take compromise.
And meanwhile, we're still seeing very active hostilities, right?
Yeah.
Even with these talks potentially on the horizon, that certainly doesn't suggest Russia is serious about de-escalation for peace, does it?
Absolutely not. The ongoing, frankly massive Russian long-range drone strikes against major Ukrainian cities also plainly demonstrate the Kremlin's lack of interest in good faith negotiations or any real de-escalation.
Can you give an example?
Sure. For instance, the Ukrainian Air Force reported Russia launched over 100 drones, a mix of jet-powered ones and those Shahid types, just on the night of August 7th to 8th. They struck multiple locations, damaging civilian and industrial infrastructure across several oblasts, Kharkiv, Kyiv, Sumy, Odessa included.
Over 100 in one night.
Yes. And a prominent Russian military blogger, or mil blogger as they're often called.
Yeah, those online commentators.
Right, often pro-Kremlin, sometimes reflecting official thinking or testing narratives. This blogger claimed over 6,000 drones were launched at Ukrainian cities just in July 2025 alone.
6,000.
That was the claim. It suggests a substantial increase from June. One day, July 9th, apparently saw 728 drones the most in a single 24-hour period since the full-scale invasion began in February 2022. So this kind of intense, ongoing military activity directly contradicts any notion of a sincere push for a ceasefire or genuine peace talks. The actions don't match the potential words. Furthermore, you see Putin being very active shoring up support abroad, making calls. He called PRC President Xi Jinping, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, other leaders too, ostensibly to discuss his meeting with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff.
What's the significance of those calls?
Well, it looks like significant posturing, doesn't it? Aimed at presenting himself as a powerful leader with broad international backing, not isolated. It suggests confidence, perhaps, in his ability to secure his war aims, whether through these negotiations or through continued military operations. It doesn't signal preparation for meaningful concessions. It also helps him cultivate a domestic narrative, for the Russian people, that Russia will be the sole decider of the war's outcome, without setting conditions for them to accept a settlement that might fall short of declared victory. So considering Vladimir Putin's long history of, disregarding or outright violating the terms of past negotiations, especially within the context of the Ukraine conflict itself and his previous dealings with the United States, expectations for these upcoming peace negotiations really should be approached with extreme caution, maybe skepticism. Putin has repeatedly demonstrated a consistent pattern, using negotiations tactically, to delay, to extract concessions, to manage how things look internationally, rather than to actually reach genuine, lasting agreements that involve real compromise. Current analysis strongly indicates that Putin continues to demand major territorial concessions from Ukraine. And he's likely using these peace talks primarily as leverage, as another tool in his kit, rather than as a real path to ending the conflict on terms anyone would consider fair. Multiple sources emphasize that Putin probably views these negotiations as just another way to maintain or maybe even enhance Russia's strategic position on the ground and globally, not really as an avenue for true compromise or a genuine peace settlement. And this pattern is entirely consistent with his past behavior dismissing or undermining agreements if they don't serve Russia's immediate interests as he defines them. The Ukrainian leadership, as you'd expect, and many Western analysts too, remain deeply skeptical of Putin's sincerity in all this. They point to his longstanding mistrust of democratic processes generally and his tendency to just reject commitments if they become inconvenient or cease to serve his objectives down the line. The Ukrainian side, as we've discussed, demands that any negotiations must include Kyiv directly. That's non-negotiable. They demand full respect for Ukraine's sovereignty, and they unequivocally reject territorial concessions that would favor Russia. However, Putin's stated conditions consistently include precisely those things: ceding control of contested regions, enforcing significant limits on Ukraine's military, its political orientation, which Ukraine and its allies universally see as, well, absolute non-starters, impossible demands. So, in summary, given Putin's track record and the fundamentally uncompromising nature of his current demands as reported, one should really anticipate tough, probably protracted negotiations, fraught with significant risks of insincerity, broken promises, and, unfortunately, continued conflict. Any genuine progress, if it's even possible, likely depends heavily on strong, credible guarantees from international actors, robust verification mechanisms, and critically, Ukraine's direct and empowered involvement throughout the process to ensure that any agreements reached are actually respected by all sides. Ultimately, while the announcement of forthcoming talks might signal that, yes, a diplomatic channel is technically open, the actual negotiations are likely to be highly contentious, extremely fragile, reflecting that profound mistrust and those fundamentally opposing goals between Russia and Ukraine. The international community should probably brace for the possibility, maybe the likelihood, that Putin may use these negotiations primarily as a strategic tool to further his war aims, rather than as a sincere effort toward building a lasting peace. And perhaps the biggest question for you, the listener, to ponder is, how can any diplomatic resolution possibly hold when one side seems to view talks as a concession to be minimized, and the other views them, potentially, as just another weapon in the conflict?
If you found this discussion valuable, please like, share, and subscribe to the Geostrategic Podcast for more in-depth analysis on topics that shape our world. Stay informed, stay ahead, and stay tuned for the next deep dive.